A quick housekeeping item before we start the show today, folks. We're focusing on supporting the show primarily through listener support this year. It's my view that listener-supported programming is critical to the overall media landscape. It keeps content independence intact, and it creates a richer and more vibrant cultural ecosystem. So if you get any value at all from what we're creating here at the Together Show, please subscribe on our website, together.show. Subscribers at any level get bonus clips, many unedited interviews, early access to certain of our episodes, and a community of other listeners. So thank you. Now, on to the show.
My go-to is to fight and to be very aggressive. Like if there's a conflict, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
We have to go knock on their door
Let's
and say
not
this
overreact.
now.
Let's just take a moment.
And then I'm like, why? Why won't you fight?
Yeah.
And so we fight about not fighting, which is the saddest fight.
I'm Eric Newton, and this is Together, the podcast where we explore the truth about human relationships. As a divorce lawyer, I saw thousands of couples break up firsthand. These days, I'm not so interested in breaking couples up, nor in keeping them together. I'm interested in what our relationships can teach us about ourselves and the world that we live in. So on this show, we have honest conversations with real people about real relationships. Ever since I started working out my own theories about relationship dynamics with my good friend Katrin back in the early 2000s, there's one concept that has held a special place in my heart, and it's partly because it's so counterintuitive, and partly, I have to admit, because it seems so dark at first blush. And that is the simple but very important fact that your ideal mate doesn't exist. Now, nobody likes to hear that, so let me explain what I mean briefly. Basically, we all carry with us an internal image of how the world should be, and specifically what our partners should or will be like when we finally meet them. But the internal image is a fantasy. It exists as an operating model for the universe, and it's useful but only as a rough guide. And we get into real trouble when we start comparing our actual reality, as we perceive it, to the internal model, because inevitably reality comes up short when we approach things that way. And so as long as we're stuck on the internal idea of perfection, we can never fully experience the magic of what's right before our eyes. Our actual partners are glorious miracles beyond definition. I know it's cheesy, but it's absolutely true. And all we need to do is pay attention. Now, there's more to the idea, so if you want to read the rest, I'll link my original article on the topic in our show notes. Either way, all of this brings us to our guests today, Jo and Nick. Now, Jo Piazza is an author with 6 very popular titles under her belt, and she's also a rather well-loved travel journalist. Most recently, she wrote a book called How to Be Married, which is a collection of advice from women all over the world about how to survive their first year of marriage. It's a delightful read and very much worth your time. We talk about it a bit on the show, and of course I'll have links to it in our show notes. And Nick is a journalist as well, and he now runs a website called Triple Pundit, which you can find at triplepundit.com. Now, what these two have come to understand better than most is that the concept of one's type is a red herring. It's fundamentally the wrong search. The question isn't whether the person you're with is your type or not. It's why you care so much. The fact that the question burns in the first place is a clue to something. And facing that underlying issue, along with all the subsequent challenges that come up in the process and afterwards, that is how you create intimacy. So I'll let them explain the rest of the details. We're joining the conversation just as Jo is telling us how she first began to let go of the entire idea of typing. So here we go.
All of a sudden, there's this outdoorsy guy who wears hiking sandals and has long hair, and he's not exactly my type. And then my therapist was like, your type really isn't working for you, so why don't you give this a shot? And I did. Mm-hmm. And then, engaged in 3 months and married in 9 months. And
it's all true.
Whirlwind romance.
It's all true.
Okay, now you just said something that I think is critical, but you just sort of just slipped it right by. Mm-hmm. He's not my type. Mm-hmm. But here we are, we're in love, and you just kind of, Nick, you just sort of blithely, yeah, that's true. I'm not her type.
Right.
But that's a loaded statement.
If coming from her, you mean?
From either, if either of you says that
Yeah.
about the other, it could be taken as much as.
I think. I mean, I never really sat around attempting to define whether I had a type or not.
Oh, you
Yeah.
had a type.
I mean, I may
was
have
not
had a
me.
type. I mean, people who look at me say, "Oh, this appears to be your type or not," but I don't know that I ever personally led a whole lot of credence to that. I mean,
I don't know.
there were, I mean, there may have been sort of patterns in history, and you may have had patterns in history, but I don't know. I mean,
I had dated people that were super type A, and Nick is much more laid back, which is great because I'm a little New York neurotic, and I needed someone that could, swoop in and be the calming force in my life and tell me, you know what, maybe we could slow down a little bit. And I'd never had that before. But I was also scared of that because I liked this crazy fast pace and being on this roller coaster all the time.
Okay, now that's a different take on the notion of typing. You're almost suggesting that it's our neurosis, it's our respective neuroses that causes us to go for a certain type of person.
100%.
And then we think that's our type, meaning we think that's the right kind of person for us, but it's only because we can't see past our own ego-generated fugue.
Absolutely.
And that what you needed was to be shaken out of that.
Yeah. I had to be shaken out of my comfort zone.
Your Darwinian process.
Exactly. And
Okay.
there's not much else to do on the equator.
So, but people really believe that their type is an important thing. I mean, you hear about people having the list.
Oh yeah,
They've got
people
the list
think that
and
it
they know-
defines them.
Yeah.
That what my type is who I am.
Right. That's the.
Because it reflects back on them, which is why, I was dating all these people that were very similar to me and not thinking outside the box. Wow, maybe I wouldn't want to date me. I'm a pain in the ass.
Rarely.
Sometimes.
Now, but then another interesting thing happened where Nick, you said I never gave a whole lot of credence to the idea of my type, but everybody else seems to think I had one. That's a different setup.
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, first of all, what was the type that everybody thought was your type?
I wouldn't even know how to tell you. I would think that somewhat cerebral, which you can be, but not necessarily. If I were to answer it the way you did and suggest you were somewhat outside my typical type, which you probably are. It's
I wear more high heels and mascara than
That's
your
true.
ex-girlfriends.
That's true. I don't like the high heels, but
No.
other than
They're
that,
they're very
I'm
slimming.
okay with it. But there's a challenge that comes with it, and like you said, if I'm, a calming influence, which I'm happy to hear, that's great. And to the extent that maybe you're a little bit more assertive than I am instinctively, that's quite helpful to me as well. And I think that we talk about this all the time, and
When you write a book about marriage, you talk about your marriage and your relationship a lot more than you would
Yeah.
had you not written the
Totally.
book.
yeah. And no, there's and we calm each other a lot. 'Cause,
We do.
I get riled up in different ways, and you tend to be. It's rare that we're riled up at the same time. And
Now-
so there's a lot of.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good stuff, and I definitely want to go to it. But
Yeah.
but my brain
to
went
type,
down
yeah.
the
Yeah.
tangent. Now, I don't think we should put it in the phrasing of typing because it doesn't resonate for you. But when you get married, you're marrying a finite human being, a limited entity. It's a grandiose way of putting it, but you are, and which means you're not getting everything that you fantasized about all your life. You're getting a set of the things that you fantasized about. Do you find yourself? Well, everybody does, but yeah, do you find yourself wishing you were getting other stuff that's not present, and then what do you?
Not
do? What do you
really.
do then? No.
Not really. I would say that if I were a lot younger, I might have, but I think that with Joe, it kind of clicked very early on that, this was great. And I didn't spend a lot of time dwelling on what might be, missing from the picture. I think that I recognized, I was well aware that there would be compromises and setbacks and so on, but I felt very prepared for that. Getting married after the age of 40, that seemed logical.
So what do you guys fight about then?
I think the only time we fight
We do fight.
is you'll be upset about something,
Uh-huh.
and I'll try to calm the situation.
Uh-huh.
And I think that, maybe I do so ineffectually or in a way that makes you
Well, because
feel
I
like I
think-
don't really understand. I'm just saying words.
Because
to-
my go-to is to
You know.
fight and like to be very aggressive,
and I
and
try
not
to
just with Nick,
smooth
but
it out. And
but
I
with
think,
other people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if there's a conflict, I'm like, no,
Yeah.
we have
And I'm
to
like,
send
okay,
this
everybody.
email. We have to go knock on their door
Let's
and
not
say
overreact.
this now.
Let's just take a moment.
And then I'm like, why? Why won't you fight?
Yeah.
And so we fight about not
Yeah.
fighting, which is the saddest fight
Yeah. It's a little of
that
that.
there is.
There's a little of that.
Yeah.
I'm slapping my forehead. It's the same dynamic. Aubrey and I, because I'm like, there's nothing matters, honey. Nothing matters. Actually, nothing matters, and particularly this, definitely in the universe of things.
That's so Buddhist of you.
Doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. And then I try to, and then she's like, well, then you're not taking me or my experience seriously.
Yeah.
Which is true.
Yeah.
I get that complaint. On the other hand, there's a little perspective I have here, and I'm not using it as a way of diminishing her as an individual
So
human.
That's the exact argument that we have. That's pretty much, that's it. That's it.
Have you guys figured out the Jedi mind trick on this?
No, there's none. There's none. I mean, Nick.
But it's being aware of it.
And it's trying to figure it out too. I mean, Nick's tried to figure out ways to diffuse the situation, and he's worked through if I'm quiet or just walk away or go to sleep.
Doesn't
and
work.
That makes it worse.
It makes it worse because then you're abandoning it.
Yeah. So then that makes me a complete psychopath.
Yeah.
Of like howling through the house. Why you don't take me seriously? We should get divorced.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Can you just not say we're gonna get divorced?" I mean,
So true.
well, no, I'm just like, why don't you leave me and date some girl who wants to save the planet and doesn't shave her armpits? And you're like, oh God, again, this. What do you think? I want to marry someone who likes jam bands more?
Yeah. Anyway.
But I think it's interesting what you said about expectations. And I think that there's something about when we go into a marriage, especially, it's a very American thing, having so many expectations and ideas about what our perfect spouse looks like, and expectations for what they're going to give us and that they're going to be our everything. And I think there's really something to what Nick said. When you're a little bit older, you realize your spouse doesn't have to fulfill everything for you. And that's one of the values of waiting to find that person. You don't expect them to be your everything, and I don't expect Nick to be my everything. I have friends for that, and parents and colleagues, and I think that that's one of the biggest traps that married couples fall into. Too often, again, and I keep saying in American culture, but it's true in American culture, we look at challenges in a marriage as a bad thing. And I think every challenge that we've faced has been really good. We got married really fast, and so we had to learn a lot of things about each other on the fly and figure a lot out on the fly. But every time things have gotten hard, they've been hard in the moment, but I love you more, like coming out the other end of them. Because we figured it out together.
That's the idea.
I know, but I don't think it's the idea for everyone. I really don't. I think we're very lucky in that regard.
When you, that is the idea, but it terrifies most people. I guess that's because of the media portrayal of how marriage is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Part of it.
The whole thing about your book was that you got outside of, you basically crowdsourced wisdom through travel.
Yeah, from
right?
around the world.
So when you got to outside of American, or let's say even Western cultures, how did that idea trace through?
It's completely different in different cultures around the world. But I will say that the American media one puts a lot of expectations around marriage. And it puts a lot of biases around marriage, of the roles of the man and the roles of the woman, and how a married couple is supposed to interact, and how often you're supposed to have sex, and how often you're supposed to have date nights, and that having children is supposed to be hard and difficult, and you're supposed to kind of hate each other afterwards. And this
worse,
is the role
sort of
the man plays.
Become a couple of buffoons on a comic sitcom where you're meant to be laughed at and miserable.
Yeah. And where the wife is just constantly snarking about the husband, and the husband is constantly lusting after hot waitresses. And, I just don't see that as much in other cultures. We didn't see that as much in other cultures. We also, other cultures.
What did you see then?
Did not put as much of importance on, some. So it runs the gamut. But Northern Europe was really interesting to us, and also France. So Northern Europe, we were in Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands. And we spent a substantial amount of time in Paris. And they just don't place the level of importance on marriage, that your marriage is the end all be all and the one thing that defines you. I know. That we do here in America. And it took a lot of the stress off. And people live together for a long time without getting married. When you get divorced, if you get divorced, there's not as much of a stigma surrounding it. That, oh my God, you failed at this thing, which I think makes the entire marriage seem fraught.
Yeah.
Unless you can succeed until you die, then you've failed at marriage. And so I think that made them a lot more relaxed. And we found that we live in this world of Instagram social media marriages, where everyone only Facebooks and Instagrams the beautiful parts of their marriage.
So true.
Of like us wearing white outfits, frolicking on a beach. And Nick and I are as guilty of that. I'm trying more and more to talk about the things that are hard and the things that are less pleasant, because I think it's important. But yeah, if you looked at my Instagram account for our first year of marriage, you'd be like, there's this couple that's traveling around the world. They have a really ridiculously good-looking dog, and they eat a lot of food and drink a lot of wine, and they seem really happy. And they wouldn't know that, there was fighting, that my dad passed away, that I had this weird genetic disorder diagnosed, that I moved across the country, and that was really hard for me. We just think that everyone's life is picture perfect, and then we feel bad about our own life, and that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Drop the shame.
Drop the shame.
Yeah.
Hashtag. Let's create a hashtag. Drop the shame.
Drop the shame. Yeah. I mean, just be real for a minute. We live in this funny, the social media thing is one thing, but the American fabricated moral structure is endlessly entertaining to me.
Entertaining.
And you don't really, you buy it. When you're living here and you haven't gotten out of this culture, you're spoon-fed that from the beginning. You just sort of assume that that's how it is and ought to be. And then you get out just anywhere outside of the United States, and you look back and you go, oh my God, that's right. We really have this. What is that?
Well, and we also don't talk about it as much. Traveling outside, being here leading up to our wedding, and this was one of the inspirations for why I wanted to write this book. Everyone tells you that marriage is hard, but they don't tell you anything else. They're like, it's hard. Yeah. And you're like,
yeah, you got to do the work. What is that?
What's the work? And I almost felt like I was being inducted into a secret sorority when I'd travel around the world, and I'd say I just got married, and then these women would just flock to me. In India, in tribal India, in Africa, these Orthodox Jewish women in Israel who would be like, you need to be having more sex and better sex, and this is how you do it. Have it this time of the month because your hormones are surging and it's so much better. And do you want my chicken biryani recipe? And I'm like, yes.
To all of that.
Yes, all of it. Like, this is really useful advice. You're not just, and no one outside the United States said marriage is hard. They just jumped right in without shame, with the constructive advice, with the, you need to talk, but how do we need, let me tell you, like, these are the kinds of things my husband and I talk about, and like, this is how we do it, and it was hard when this happened, but like, and I feel like we create this sense of shame if we don't have a perfect marriage. So no one, even amongst my close girlfriends, it's rare that people will talk about the things that are actually difficult in a marriage.
Yeah. I did want to ask about that personality thing. You've got this way of, she'll say something that could be edgy or, that could trigger a response. And you'll just say, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, it often usually is.
Just like
So
that.
that's that.
And when it keeps coming out, I keep wondering, okay, wait a minute. What else is going on here? Are you really just that lets the world kind of flows as it does?
I don't know.
It does.
my
Except,
moments.
except when you
then
get
you-
pissed
but then
about
you
the
punched a
rental
wall.
car. Yeah, I mean, that you were really mad about that rental car.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But,
So sometimes something will trigger an eruption.
but it's little things. It's like little silly like annoyances. Computers. The fact
a
that
great trigger.
the fact that the
Love computers.
the internet should be better than it is. And we should all go back to using pre-Netscape days in circa 1997.
That was the golden era.
Yeah. But like on big things, he's very calm, whereas I'm so reactive.
Are you wishing that something else would come out? I mean, is it too calm? Is it not
No,
enough
it's
texture?
good. It's very good for me.
It works.
It works but I sometimes, and I do this with not just with Nick, but with San Francisco generally, that I almost try to play this part of like I can be more shocking than this.
Because I'm from New York.
Like, look at me. Like I can say something that will really knock your socks off.
Right.
But no, he takes it all in stride, and he's just like, well, that's my wife, just
Well, pretty much.
saying these ridiculous
much.
things, writing a book about our marriage.
Yeah, right. I temper you a little bit.
You do.
I can tell when, because I think sometimes, yeah, you're right. You sometimes feel the need to want to.
Well, sometimes I want to shock and awe people, especially
right.
here.
And I'm like, not necessary.
You're like, you don't have to
It's
say
like-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with it, but you can get the same reaction.
But I will say, I mean, I married like a really, really good guy. My agent's big issue with the book has always been Nick's too nice. Nick comes off as too good a guy. Can you
It's true.
can you
actually.
temper that?
I
And
should have done something really wrong.
I know. I asked you to cheat on me. I was like, can you create some
I mean,
tension?
you just kind of keep like in the course of even this interview, you just keep wondering, is it that he's got a really strong armor, that you just don't let anybody in to the truth, and that there's actually something else there, or it's just this is who is down to the.
This is it.
I
I think this is actually
I'm not gonna
it.
flatter myself by answering that.
Yeah.
It
So,
is. You're kind of like this like steady rock.
Usually.
Yeah.
Nick, what's the point of life, Nick?
Oh God.
Oh, come on.
Nobody knows. That's the answer. Nobody knows. You gotta, just learn not to be a jackass to people. Do what you need to do, but don't be, a hoarding, overconsumptive waste of time and resources. You have to take care of yourself, but that's not what it's all about, I guess. At the end of the day, we have no idea. Obviously, this gets deep into how we're raised and, cultures and the nature of ethics and morality that get bestowed upon us in our culture and everything in between. But there seems to generally be a somewhat universal rule of, whether you're fully cognizant of it or not, we're all in something together, and there's at least somewhere when your mind is clear enough, there's a feeling of shared experience, which should suggest that not being entirely self-centered makes sense. Since we're on that sort of morality track.
You're right, yeah. And then how about money and happiness?
Yeah.
Are there shoulds around money and happiness?
Yeah, well, that's one of those questions that comes, like what we were asking ourselves. Right? And money's useful. It's a useful tool. It's handy. It's good to have it around. And also, that there's addictive behavior that comes along with money, and the old golden handcuffs.
Let me just tell you why I even asked it. So I was still trying to figure out, are you a nice guy or do you have armor on?
Yeah.
And it's, my personal favorite inquiry in life is what's true. It's just the question I'm always asking. And then it has all kinds of deep existential tendrils that, and pathways you can go down, rabbit holes, I guess. But it seems to me like those questions are at the core of our behavior, really. Because, everything is derived from how we see the universe. Like, what's the point of us being here? And some people are really attached to particular outcomes. Like, boy, if those outcomes don't happen, everything is horrible. And there's danger. And there's going to be pain. And we're all fucked. And then, a lot of fights come out. That's where anxiety and conflict all comes out of. It's like, God, the world has to be this way, and you are keeping me from getting the world to be that way. You're standing in the way of my goddamn safety. And then there's another way of seeing the world, which you just expressed, which is a little bit more, you're saying, I don't think there's any meaning inherently. And it kind of doesn't matter what happens. I'm going to do my best to not be a jackass and to not cause suffering around me.
And it's funny, though, because even though I would say that, I still go out and I'm quite active about, wanting to live in a great city that works, that's fair, and getting political and everything. The thing is that should never be interpreted as nihilism.
Right.
The point of it is to it also protects you from rigidity, which can be as destructive as, which can be destructive. You know? Yes, things matter. We matter because I say they matter. But, a lot of that stuff matters less than you thought it did, and don't get too attached to it.
Right.
Basically.
Okay. Now that worldview comes into a relationship with, let's call it, I don't know, a New York worldview, which is that no, actually, things have meaning.
Things have meaning. Outcomes matter.
This all matters.
Yeah.
This matters.
The best thing that Nick says to me, and he says this on a regular basis, is, I don't know what else to tell you, but I know it's going to be okay. I know we're going to be okay. Yeah. It's going to be okay. When I'm stressing out about when I was stressed if I was going to get pregnant or not, when I was stressed if anyone was going to read my book, or if I was going to ever be able to write another book again, or finding another job after Yahoo imploded and laid me off while we were on Mount Kilimanjaro via text message. He says it all the time. He's like, it's going to be okay. But I get so attached to these outcomes and to markers of success, to be honest. Yeah. I believe the purpose of life is like somewhat a little bit more trite. Like, I believe in creating something that leaves the world a little bit better than when you first came into it. And so I think that's part of the reason that I became a writer and a storyteller, to try to advance the conversation. And I'm like Alexander Hamilton, obsessed with my legacy of like leaving something behind. And Nick is much more laid back about it, that, we're just going to live our life. Yeah. And he says that a lot too. Yeah. We're living our life. But it doesn't imply a sense of nihilism or ennui at all about it.
Well, what's beautiful about this dynamic is that it sort of expresses the fundamental conflict that we're all faced with when we think about the nature of our own existence. Because we are having an experience and we are attached to it being a good one. Whether, no matter how much we meditate and how enlightened we might each become in any given moment, we're still attached to the goodness and we're avoiding the badness. And then that has nuance and layers of sophistication that become, I'm going to leave the world a better place, or what have you. And also, we don't know shit.
No.
And holding those two things is sort of the trick of life, and they're in each of those is expressed in the two of you. And the funny thing about living a life is walking that knife's edge and holding them both at the same time, learning the paradox of those two simultaneous, completely contradictory truths. And you guys are doing it in your dynamic, really nicely, really with
Thank
very
you.
low conflict. I mean, a
I think it's
beautiful
pretty
book
good.
came out of it.
I think it's pretty good.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's where, I mean, it's really, really our marriage. And I can say this honestly because I talk about the things that are hard a lot, but our marriage is better than I expected marriage to be, which I mean, I grew up, my parents fought a lot. They should have gotten divorced and they didn't because they were of that ilk that thought that if you stayed together, that was success.
Yeah,
as
right.
opposed divorce equals giant failure.
Yeah.
And so they were miserable for most of their lives. I didn't know that marriage could be this good or this fulfilling.
From each of your two perspectives on that existential conundrum, how do you each allow the other to be where you are?
Oh, well, you just have to allow it, I guess.
I think sometimes I also push you a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah. It's true.
yeah.
And usually that's great.
Yeah. And whereas you kind of pull me back from the brink of
Mm-hmm.
obsession, obsessive compulsiveness.
Mm-hmm. That's probably true.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
I have an image of these two whenever I think of them. It's of tandem tightrope walkers. They're holding on to one another, leaning out in opposite directions in order to balance on the tightrope. And actually, as I understand it, that was one of the rejected ideas for the cover of Joe's book, which, you know, now that I think about it, probably says everything that you need to know about why I'm not a graphic designer. Anyway, the image persists for me because it's so poignant to this conversation. Once you're in a relationship, the question of type just isn't the point anymore. You know, it's the wrong inquiry. And frankly, it's inherently narcissistic. It's about you and not the relationship. The more important question is, how do you two best make a partnership? Now, you should definitely check out Joe's book. It's called How to Be Married, and you can find it on Amazon and all the other major retailers. It's really a delightful read. It's full of wisdom and also the stories behind how she came to these points through her travels in all these different cultures. Definitely worth your time. And I'll have a link to it on our website as well. And you can find Nick on his website, which is triplepundit.com. That's triplepundit.com, and I'll have a link to that in our show notes as well. Now, next week, we're going to be taking another look at this question of typing from a somewhat more challenging angle. So if you're interested in this issue, stay tuned for that show, and it'll be up on Monday. If you like what you heard in the show today, there are two things that you can do to support us. The first, leave us a review on iTunes. It's a low-risk, low-cost thing that you can do, and it makes a big difference for us. The second is become a subscriber. We would love your support in this way. Subscribers get access to bonus content, unedited interviews, early access to some of our episodes, and of course, a community of other listeners that you can interact with. And you can find links to all of that on our website, which is www.together.show. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle at both of those places is together_show. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. And you can always email me at host@together.guide. The music in this episode is from Blue Dot Sessions. You can find their website at sessions.blue. And that is all for today, folks. See you next week. Bye for now.